This first story comes from Jake, a paramedic with 10 years of experience working for Seattle Fire Department's emergency medical services. Jake has responded to thousands of calls, heart attacks, strokes, overdoses, traumatic injuries. He's seen people in their final moments, and he's brought people back from the edge of death more times than he can count. But one call last November still makes him check his rearview mirror obsessively when he's driving the ambulance. It was 11:47 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday when Jake and his partner Maria received a call for an unresponsive elderly male at a residential address in the Ballard neighborhood. The dispatch notes indicated the patient's wife had found him collapsed in their living room, not breathing, no pulse. Jake was driving. Maria was in the passenger seat preparing equipment. They arrived on scene in 8 minutes, well within the critical window for cardiac arrest survival. The patient was an 82-year-old man named Walter Chun. His wife had already started CPR based on 911 dispatcher instructions. Jake and Maria took over immediately, working through their protocols with the practiced efficiency that comes from years of training. They got a pulse back after the second round of defibrillation. Walter was unconscious but breathing, and his heart was beating on its own. They loaded him onto the gurney and into the ambulance for transport to Harborview Medical Center. Maria stayed in the back with Walter, monitoring his vitals and maintaining his airway. Jake climbed into the driver's seat and started the 12-minute drive to the hospital. About 3 minutes into the transport, Jake heard Maria's voice through the communication system. "Jake, patient is stable. Vitals are holding steady. Copy that." Jake responded, navigating through the wet Seattle streets. But as the crew positioned the ladder, Marcus kept his eyes on the girl. She wasn't trying to escape through the window. She was still pointing to the other window, the one on the left side of the house, gesturing frantically. It was as if she was trying to tell him something. "Marcus, what are you doing?" his captain called. "Get up that ladder." "Sir, I think she's pointing to another victim. The left window. She keeps pointing there." The captain looked up at the right window. "What are you talking about? I don't see anyone in that window." Marcus felt confused. "Sir, there's a little girl right there, in a white nightgown. You don't see her." "Marcus, that window is empty. There's no one there. Now get up that ladder and search the second floor." Marcus climbed the ladder to the right side window, but when he reached it, there was no little girl. The room was filled with smoke and empty of occupants. But he couldn't shake the image of her pointing to the left window. He radioed down. "Captain, I'm moving to the left side window. Something's telling me that's where they are." Marcus made his way through the second floor, which was rapidly filling with smoke and heat. Visibility was near zero. He reached the left side bedroom and found them, a mother and 2 children, unconscious on the floor, huddled together near the window. He radioed for assistance and helped evacuate all 3 victims. The mother and 1 child survived with smoke inhalation. But the other child, a little girl, approximately 8 years old, was already deceased when they found her. Later, after the fire was extinguished, Marcus learned the full story. The family had been sleeping when fire broke out on the first floor. The mother woke up and tried to get both children out, but the smoke and heat were too intense. She made it to the left bedroom with both kids, the room farthest from the fire, but one daughter had already succumbed to smoke inhalation. The little girl who died was Anya. Linda ran from the room and immediately called security. When the security officer arrived, the heart monitor was off, unplugged, with a dead battery. The call light was inactive. The intercom showed no record of recent communication. But Linda wasn't finished with room 237. 2 days later, the room was assigned to a new patient, a middle-aged woman recovering from a stroke. Linda wasn't assigned to that room, but around 2 a.m., she saw the call light for 237 activate. The nurse assigned to that room was busy with another patient, so Linda responded. When she entered the room, the stroke patient was sleeping peacefully, but the woman's daughter, who had been dozing in the bedside chair, was wide awake and looked terrified. "Did you hear that?" the daughter whispered to Linda. "Hear what?" "Someone was talking to my mother." A man's voice. He was telling her that the nurses here are wonderful, that they'll take good care of her. But there's no one else in the room. This next story comes from Marcus, who worked as a night orderly at a regional medical center in Pennsylvania. Marcus's job involved transporting patients, moving equipment, and handling various tasks that kept the hospital running during overnight hours. The medical center was a 7-story building, with patient floors on levels 2 through 6. The basement housed the morgue, storage, and mechanical systems. The 7th floor was administrative offices, mostly empty at night. Marcus had been working nights for about 8 months when he started noticing something odd about elevator number 3. The hospital had 4 elevators, but elevator 3 had developed a peculiar habit. During night shifts, it would frequently stop at the 7th floor on its own, despite no one calling for it. The doors would remain open for exactly 30 seconds, then close and return to whatever floor it had been summoned to. Marcus initially assumed it was a mechanical issue and reported it to maintenance several times. The technicians could never find anything wrong with it. The elevator functioned perfectly during the day. The problem only occurred during night shifts, typically between midnight and 4 a.m. After a few weeks of this, Marcus started paying closer attention to elevator 3's behavior. He noticed that it didn't stop at the 7th floor randomly. It only happened when the elevator was transporting patients who had died during the night shift. When Marcus was moving a deceased patient from a room to the morgue, elevator 3 would make its unauthorized stop at the 7th floor. When he was transporting living patients or equipment, the elevator functioned normally. Jennifer made a split-second decision. She went left, off the planned route, scrambling down a steep ravine that she hadn't noticed before. "Jennifer, what are you doing?" her crew boss radioed. "Get to the safety zone." "I don't know, sir. Something told me to go this way." As Jennifer descended into the ravine, she found a small creek bed with minimal vegetation, a natural fire break. She deployed her fire shelter, the aluminum emergency tent that firefighters use as a last resort. Above her, she heard the fire roar over the ridge where her crew had been heading. The sound was like a freight train, consuming everything in its path. After 15 terrifying minutes huddled in her shelter, Jennifer heard voices on the radio. "Jennifer, do you copy? Report your status." "I'm okay. I'm in a ravine about 200 yards west of our original route. I have good cover here." When the fire passed and Jennifer reunited with her crew, they told her what had happened. The safety zone they'd been heading toward had been overrun by the fire. The flames jumped the break and burned right through the area where they would have been sheltered. If they'd reached the safety zone as planned, they likely would have been seriously injured or killed. But Jennifer's decision to go left into the ravine had saved her life. And because she radioed her position, the crew boss made a last-second decision to redirect the entire crew to follow her route. All 19 firefighters survived because Jennifer followed the voice that told her to go left. Later that night, back at base camp, Jennifer mentioned the voice to her crew boss. Someone told me to go left. Clear as day. I thought maybe it was you on the radio, but it wasn't radio traffic. It was like someone was right next to me. The crew boss went quiet. Then he pulled out his phone and showed Jennifer a photo. Did the voice sound like this man? We wait here, Mr. Patterson explained. Before we move on, it's peaceful on the 7th floor. Quiet. And we wanted to thank the people who cared for us. The elevator doors began to close. Marcus reached for the button to hold them open, but Mr. Patterson held up his hand. Take care of Mrs. Rodriguez, he said. She's ready to join us now. And Marcus, thank you for treating us like people, not just bodies. That means more than you know. The doors closed, and the elevator continued to the basement. Marcus completed his task in the morgue, but he couldn't stop thinking about what he'd seen. When he returned upstairs, he immediately took elevator 3 to the 7th floor to investigate. The hallway was empty and dark, but it didn't feel empty, if that makes sense. It felt inhabited. Marcus started asking other night staff about the 7th floor. What he learned made his experience even more unsettling. The 7th floor had originally been patient rooms when the hospital first opened in 1965. But in 1978, following a series of unexplained deaths and patients' complaints about disturbing presences, the entire floor was converted to administrative use. The deaths had all occurred in room 717, always during night shifts, always involving patients who were expected to recover. No medical explanation was ever found for these deaths, but they stopped completely once patient care was moved away from the 7th floor. Room 717 was now used for storage, but Marcus learned from security that the motion sensors in that room activated frequently during night shifts, despite no one having access to it. Marcus continued working at the hospital for 6 more months after his encounter. Elevator 3 continued its pattern of stopping at the 7th floor when transporting deceased patients. But Marcus never saw Mr. Patterson or the others again. However, he did notice something else. Family members of patients who had passed away sometimes reported dreams or brief visitations from their loved ones. In these encounters, the deceased person always mentioned being in a peaceful place in the hospital, waiting with others who had been well cared for. They specifically mentioned a kind, orderly named Marcus who had treated them with respect and dignity. Marcus eventually left the hospital to work in a different field, but he sent me documentation of the elevator maintenance records, showing the repeated reports of mechanical issues that were never resolved. He also provided copies of the historical records about the 7th floor's conversion and the unexplained deaths in room 717. Sometimes, it seems, the boundary between life and death isn't as clear as we'd like to believe. And sometimes, those who have crossed that boundary want to express their gratitude to those who showed them kindness in their final moments. This third story is the hardest one for me to share, and I'll warn you now that it involves children. If you're sensitive to content involving pediatric patients, you may want to skip ahead to the final story. This comes from Jennifer, a pediatric nurse who worked at a children's hospital in Denver. Jennifer had been working in pediatric care for 12 years, specializing in critical care for seriously ill children. It's one of the most emotionally demanding jobs in healthcare, and Jennifer was exceptionally good at it. The children's hospital where Jennifer worked had a special ward for terminally ill patients, children who were receiving palliative care rather than curative treatment. This ward was designed to be as comfortable and home-like as possible, with family sleeping areas, play spaces, and a staff trained specifically in end-of-life care for children. Jennifer often worked the night shift in this ward, from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Night shifts in pediatric palliative care are unique. They're quieter, more peaceful, but also heavy with the weight of families spending what might be their final nights with their children. In the spring of last year, Jennifer was caring for a 7-year-old boy named Tommy who was in the final stages of leukemia. Tommy had been in the hospital for several weeks, and Jennifer had become very attached to him. He was brave, funny, and despite his illness, he always tried to cheer up the other children in the ward. Tommy's room was at the end of the hall, room 314. Across the hall in room 313 was Emma, a 5-year-old girl with a rare genetic condition. The two children had become friends, and their families had grown close during their parallel journeys. On a Tuesday night in April, Tommy passed away peacefully in his sleep around 2:30 a.m. His family was with him, and Jennifer was there to help them through those final moments. It was heartbreaking, but as peaceful as such a situation could be. Long pause, then 2 beeps. Okay, stay where you are. Officers are on their way. Is the person who might hurt you in the same room as you right now? 1 for yes, 2 for no. Instead of beeps, Rachel heard something that made her blood run cold. A child's voice, very faint, as if coming from far away. "Mommy, why won't you answer me?" Rachel felt her heart race. "Hello? Is there a child there? If you can hear me, I need you to respond." "Mommy, you're scaring me. Why are you just standing there?" Rachel could hear footsteps, small ones, like a child walking around. "Mommy, there are people at the door. Should I let them in?" Rachel immediately radioed the responding officers. "Unit 12, approach with extreme caution. We have a child at the residence. Adult caller unable to speak. Possible domestic situation in progress." Through the phone, Rachel could hear knocking and police officers identifying themselves. Then she heard the child's voice again. "Mommy, the police want to come in. Why won't you move?" Rachel heard the front door open and officers entering the house. "Unit 12, we're inside the residence," came the radio call. "We have a situation here. Requesting detective unit and coroner." Rachel's heart sank. In domestic violence situations, calls for the coroner usually meant they were too late. But what the officers found was far more disturbing than a typical domestic violence case. They found a woman standing in the middle of the living room, completely motionless, staring straight ahead. She was alive, breathing, but completely unresponsive to any stimulus. No injuries, no signs of struggle, no indication of what had caused her catatonic state. More importantly, there was no child in the house. The woman was identified as Jennifer Walsh, a single mother who lived alone. According to neighbors, she had a 4-year-old daughter named Emma, but Emma had died in a car accident 6 months earlier. Last week, he died searching for victims on an upper floor. Smoke inhalation. By the time we found him, he'd already rescued 3 people, but he went back in for more and got disoriented in the smoke. The lieutenant paused. Michael was known for his search skills. He had an uncanny ability to find people in fires, even in zero visibility. He'd say he could feel where people were, like he was being guided. Tony felt chills. "You think that was him? Helping me search?" I think Michael wouldn't let a little thing like death stop him from doing his job. He loved searching, loved saving people. If there's any firefighter who would still be out there helping, it would be him. Tony learned more about Michael Rodriguez over the following weeks. He'd been an aggressive, skilled firefighter who had saved dozens of lives during his career. He'd received multiple commendations for his search and rescue operations. And according to several firefighters who had worked with him, Michael always had a sixth sense about where to find victims in fires. He'd go directly to the right apartment, the right room, as if someone was telling him where to look. The phone was a toy phone, a plastic children's play phone that wasn't connected to any phone line. Rachel provided me with the call logs, police reports, medical records, and photos of the toy phone. She also sent me the audio recording of Emma's voice from the 911 call. The audio analysis confirmed that the voice belonged to a young child, approximately 4 years old, speaking with the vocabulary and speech patterns consistent with that age. But Emma Walsh had been dead for 6 months. Rachel believes that Emma was trying to get help for her mother, who had become lost in grief and was slowly fading away from reality. The 911 call might have saved Jennifer's life. She received the psychological help she needed and has slowly begun to recover. Sometimes, it seems, love transcends death. And sometimes, a child's concern for their parent is strong enough to reach across the divide between worlds to ask for help. Emma just wanted someone to take care of her mommy when she couldn't anymore. This final story comes from Dr. Sarah Kim, an emergency room physician at a trauma center in Atlanta. Dr. Kim has been working in emergency medicine for 8 years, and she's accustomed to high-stress situations, life or death decisions, and the adrenaline-fueled environment of a busy ER. But what she experienced during a particularly intense night shift last summer challenged everything she thought she knew about life and death. It was a Saturday night in July, the kind of night that ER staff dread: hot weather, full moon, and a steady stream of trauma cases. Dr. Kim was working a 12-hour shift that started at 7 p.m., and by midnight, the ER was at capacity with multiple critical patients. Around 1:30 a.m., paramedics brought in a young man named David who had been in a severe motorcycle accident. David was unconscious, with multiple traumatic injuries, including a serious head trauma. The paramedics had managed to stabilize him enough for transport, but his condition was critical. Dr. Kim was the attending physician for David's case. As the trauma team worked to assess and treat his injuries, it became clear that David's situation was extremely grave. His brain scans showed massive swelling, and despite their best efforts, his vital signs were deteriorating rapidly. David's girlfriend, Maria, had arrived at the hospital and was waiting in the family conference room. She was distraught, as any loved one would be, but she kept insisting that she needed to see David immediately. "He's trying to tell me something," she told Dr. Kim. "I can hear him calling my name. Please, I need to see him." Hospital policy typically limits family access during active trauma treatment, but Dr. Kim could see that Maria was genuinely distressed in a way that went beyond normal worry. Against protocol, she allowed Maria to briefly visit David in the trauma bay. Marcus made a note to dispatch a rescue boat to 847 Riverside Drive as soon as one became available. But something about the call bothered him. If the area was under 8 feet of water, how was a landline still working? "Mrs. Williams, I want you to stay calm. Help is coming. Can you tell me exactly what you can see from your window?" "Just water everywhere. The Hendersons' house next door. I can only see their roof now. And the Patel family across the street. Their whole house is underwater except for the very top." Marcus continued taking calls throughout the night, but he kept thinking about Dorothy and Robert Williams. When a rescue boat finally became available at dawn, he specifically requested that they check 847 Riverside Drive first. 2 hours later, the rescue team radioed back with information that made Marcus question everything he thought he understood. "Dispatch, we're at 847 Riverside Drive. The house is completely underwater, has been for at least 12 hours based on water damage patterns. We checked the second floor, it's flooded up to the ceiling. No one could have survived in this house." Marcus felt confused. "Did you check thoroughly? We had a caller reporting they were trapped on the second floor." "Negative, dispatch. The second floor is completely submerged. We also checked the neighboring houses the caller mentioned, 845 and 849 Riverside. Both houses have been underwater for hours. No survivors at any of these addresses." But Marcus had spoken to Dorothy Williams for over an hour throughout the night. She had called back 3 more times, providing updates on their condition and asking about rescue estimates. Marcus pulled the call logs and traced the phone number. The landline belonged to Robert and Dorothy Williams at 847 Riverside Drive. But according to utility company records, that phone line had been severed by flood damage at 2 a.m., 2.5 hours before Marcus received the first call. As Dr. Kim was completing the necessary procedures and preparing to speak with Maria about next steps, something unprecedented happened. The trauma bay's automatic doors, which required either a key card or a pressure plate to operate, opened on their own. No one was near them, and the pressure plates showed no activation. The doors remained open for exactly 30 seconds, long enough for two people to walk through, then closed automatically. Dr. Kim immediately checked with security about the door malfunction. The electronic logs showed no key card access, no pressure plate activation, and no mechanical failure. The doors had simply opened and closed on their own. But Maria saw something that Dr. Kim couldn't. "They're leaving together," Maria told her, looking toward the doors. David and his father. His dad finally got to meet him. Over the following weeks, Dr. Kim couldn't stop thinking about what she'd witnessed. She reviewed David's medical records and discovered details that Maria couldn't have known. David's father, Sergeant Michael Torres, had died in Afghanistan when David was 17. According to military records, Sergeant Torres had been awarded a Bronze Star for staying with wounded soldiers under enemy fire, refusing to leave them behind even when ordered to retreat. He had died while protecting others, just as he seemed to be protecting his son during David's final moments. Dr. Kim also learned that the trauma bay where David had been treated was the same room where Sergeant Torres had been brought 5 years earlier when his body was returned from overseas. The family had been allowed a brief private viewing before the funeral home took custody. But the most unsettling discovery came when Dr. Kim reviewed the security footage from that night. The cameras clearly showed the automatic doors opening and closing with no visible cause. But in the split second before the doors opened, there appeared to be two translucent figures near David's bedside. One shorter figure that seemed to be supported by a taller figure in what looked like military fatigues. The image was brief and unclear, but it was definitely there on the recording. Dr. Kim provided me with copies of the security footage, the door access logs, David's medical records, and military records for Sergeant Torres. She also included statements from other staff members who witnessed the unexplained door activation. In the emergency room, doctors fight death every day. They see miracles and tragedies in equal measure. But sometimes, Dr. Kim learned, death isn't the enemy. Sometimes it's a reunion. And sometimes, love transcends even the finality of death, ensuring that no one has to face the unknown alone. This final story comes from Lisa, a 911 dispatcher in a small town in Oregon with a population of about 8,000 people. In small towns, dispatchers often know the callers personally. They handle everything from medical emergencies for their neighbors to helping lost pets find their way home. But last spring, Lisa received a call that involved children she had known her entire life, even though those children had been missing for over 20 years. On a Saturday afternoon in May, Lisa was working the day shift when she received what seemed like a routine call about children playing in a dangerous area. 911, what's your emergency? Hi, this is calling to report some children playing near the old quarry on Mill Road, said a woman's voice. I'm worried about their safety. You know how deep that water is. Lisa knew the quarry well. It had been abandoned since the 1980s and had filled with water over the years. The town had posted warning signs because the water was deceptively deep, but kids still occasionally played in the area despite repeated warnings from parents and police. Can you describe the children you saw? Lisa asked. There are 3 of them, 2 boys and a girl, maybe around 8 to 10 years old. One of the boys has red hair and freckles, the other has dark hair. The little girl has blonde pigtails. They're playing on the rocks near the water. Lisa felt a chill. The description was incredibly specific, and something about it was triggering a memory she couldn't quite place. Are the children still there? Can you see them now? Yes, they're still playing by the water. They don't seem to be listening to the warning signs. I'm worried one of them might fall in. Lisa dispatched an officer to check the quarry while keeping the caller on the line. What's your name, and where are you calling from? My name is Janet Morrison. I'm driving by on Mill Road, and I can see them from here. Fires, often filling with smoke and superheated gases. Kevin, what are you doing? His lieutenant radioed. We have all occupants out. Return to fire attack. Lieutenant, something's telling me I need to check this basement. Negative, return to. But Kevin was already descending the stairs. The basement was full of smoke, but relatively cool compared to the first floor. He swept his light through the darkness and saw her. A young woman, probably in her 20s, lying unconscious on the floor near a washer and dryer. She was wearing pajamas, and there was blood on her face. She'd apparently fallen down the stairs. Command, I have a victim in the basement. Female, unconscious, trauma to the head. I need EMS ready. Kevin carried the woman up the stairs and out of the building. Paramedics immediately began treating her. She was alive, breathing, but unconscious from what appeared to be a serious head injury. The incident commander was confused. Kevin, the homeowner, said he lives alone. Who is this? As it turned out, the woman was the homeowner's granddaughter. She'd been visiting from out of town and was doing laundry in the basement when the fire broke out. She tried to come upstairs but tripped and fell down the basement stairs, knocking herself unconscious. Her grandfather, sleeping upstairs, hadn't known she was in the basement. When the fire started and he evacuated, he assumed she was still at a friend's house where she'd been earlier that evening. He had no idea she'd come back. If Kevin hadn't gone to the basement, she would have died down there, overcome by smoke while unconscious. But here's what made the rescue impossible to explain. The homeowner's daughter, the granddaughter's mother, had died in that house 5 years earlier. She died of a heart attack in the living room, and according to the homeowner, she'd always worried about the basement stairs. She was always saying someone would fall down those stairs someday, he told Kevin later. She wanted me to install a railing, but I never got around to it. The voice Kevin heard urging him to check the basement, the voice that saved the granddaughter's life, had sounded like a young woman. Urgent, desperate, maternal. The granddaughter survived. She was hospitalized with a concussion and smoke inhalation, but she made a full recovery. Kevin never heard the voice again, but he didn't need to. He knew whose voice it had been. A mother who had worried about those dangerous basement stairs for years had finally been proven right. But even in death, she'd found a way to make sure someone checked on her daughter, trapped in the basement she'd always feared. Kevin provided me with the incident report, statements from the incident commander about Kevin entering the basement despite confirmation that all occupants were out, and medical records for the granddaughter confirming her injuries and treatment. He also included the death certificate for the homeowner's daughter, who died in the house 5 years earlier. Sometimes, it seems, a mother's protective instinct doesn't end with death. She'd worried about those stairs. She'd known someone would get hurt. And when her worst fear came true and her daughter was trapped in that basement, unconscious and alone in a burning house, she found a firefighter who would listen to her voice and check one more time. Kevin says he doesn't know if he believes in ghosts or supernatural experiences, but he knows he heard a voice that saved a life, and he knows whose voice it was. And that's enough.